Behavior is very complex. Most people don't realize it, but it's not just like, I want to do this thing, so I'm going to do this thing. We think we have free will, but oftentimes it's these things in our environment within us and around us that are triggering us to do things. And if we fight that, we're literally just beating our head against a brick wall. Many ladies are familiar with this, where you go pee on the toilet and then all of a sudden 15 minutes have gone by because, Instagram or whatever is right there and you're like, what the hell just happened? Physics doesn't like void, so we have to fill that void with a more productive habit. We need to make the experience of doing it rewarding rather than doing it to get a reward. What research actually shows, especially with discipline and willpower, is that if you want to build a flossing habit, you start flossing the gap between one tooth. I kept running into one problem, which is no matter what I teach my clients, whatever knowledge you give them, skills you help them develop, I could never figure out how to get them to do the thing.
If you've ever felt like you know what to do for your health but can't seem to make it stick, then today's conversation is exactly what you need. Our guest began her career as an exercise physiologist and personal trainer and has spent 17 plus years in the health and fitness industry, working both as a university level educator and mentor and as a coach helping clients with nutrition and fitness. Over time, she noticed something critical. People don't just need better workouts or nutrition plans, they need better systems, behaviors, and mindsets to support long-term change. For the past nearly 7 years, she's focused her work on the science of habit formation and behavior change, helping individuals and other professionals build the systems that actually make healthy habits sustainable. She's the co-founder of the Habit Coach Professionals and the author of Do the Thing, a science-backed process to help you take action even when motivation fails and life gets messy. In today's episode, we're diving into how habits are really built, why willpower isn't the answer, and how to create systems that support your goals long-term. Erin, welcome to Wellness Big Sis, the pod. So it's early 2026, and I feel like a lot of people are starting to hit that point where they're realizing their goals that they have set for 2026 and the habits that they wanted to form are going to take a little bit more effort than what they thought. It's a little harder to be consistent with them. We've all stopped riding that sort of New Year's, new wave hype, motivation. The whole world's creating goals. It's very motivating. And now we're starting to settle in and realize it might take a little bit more effort. So let's start with the science behind actually forming goals. What sort of systems are there to actually form certain habits and goals and make them a part of our routine well into December 2026, not just here in the beginning of 2026?
Sure, yeah. So I think there's a little bit of a difference between goals and maybe our habits, but perhaps there shouldn't be, as I'll explain. So oftentimes there are 3 levels of goals. If you've ever read Atomic Habits by James Clear, he's talked about this, but there are outcome goals, there are process goals, and then there are identity-based goals. So most people, especially with their New Year's resolutions, set outcome goals. I want to lose 25 pounds by X date. I want to meditate more. I want to feel better. They're kind of like these long things that are out, not very much definition around them, and therefore we don't have much control over them. Now, process goals are the next step that's really good. Those are the actions that are going to actually get us to those outcomes that we want. So maybe I'm actually in the gym for 20 minutes doing strength training 3 times a week, or I'm reading 10 minutes every morning if I want to be a better reader, or writing, whatever those goals might be, meditating, whatnot. And then there's the identity goals. It's like, who do I want to be? What is it innately feels like me and the values I have and how I want to live out my life? So digging deeper from that just outcome-based goal that most of us set into those process and then even identity goals are going to help us stick longer. When it comes into habits and the behaviors for those behavior-based goals, behavior is very complex. Most people don't realize it, but it's not just like, I want to do this thing, so I'm going to do this thing. There are a variety of things that go into how we make decisions, and then what makes behaviors happen, and then how does a behavior actually get repeated and turned into a habit. So if we are looking to build better habits, we need to look into things like what is activating our habits. So both internally, so things like thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, and externally, all of the dings and pings in our environment, smells. If you always drive by a drive-thru and you always smell the burger and fries, are you activated to go get fast food? The people you see in your environment, friends, family, coworkers, at home, at work, wherever you might be in your third space. And then just what's around your home space, Do you have healthy food sitting out, or is it junk food sitting out? Do you have things that are going to encourage you to be active or sit around? Do you have things that are going to encourage you to read, to meditate, to write, to be a good partner or friend? So those things in our environment are super important to triggering the behaviors we do. We think we have free will, but oftentimes it's these things in our environment within us and around us that are triggering us to do things. So we need to take note of those things. We also need to have the ability to do the behavior, which people think, of course I can write every day, or of course I can eat healthy, like I have the ability, but there are so many things that go into ability. The knowledge to do it, the skills to do it, the resources to be able to do it, but also our own perceived ability and self-efficacy. So do we have the confidence that we can do this? Not just on like day one when we're like super motivated and gung-ho, but on our worst possible day when like shit has hit the fan and, everything's going wrong. And I still need to be able to take action and build this identity that I want to have through my actions. I think the most overlooked one is we need to have a rewarding experience. People often forget about this, but we are wired for immediate gratification. That is millennia of evolution nudging us in the direction of going towards whatever is gratifying immediately and rewarding immediately and enjoyable immediately. And if we fight that, we're literally just beating our head against a brick wall. So instead of fighting it, why don't we work with it? So a lot of times the things that are valuable to us and the changes we want to make, they're hard to do. They're unpleasant to do. And so how do we make those more enjoyable and easier to do? And then we just have to have our environments set up so that we can consistently repeat the things we want to do, or set up so we don't consistently repeat the things we don't want to do. And that's just, a summary. And it gets very, very complex when you actually start to assess those things and dig in. But that's what I would take note as far as like building a habit. And then the goals we set should be more focused towards those behavior-based goals and identity-based goals as opposed to our outcome-based goals.
I think a lot of us struggle the most, like you said, with those outcome-based goals. We set them for, I want this result, but we don't think backwards of the process or the identity change that needs to happen. I've mentioned this before, but the book Atomic Habits was one that I rebelled against for a while because so many people talk about it, so many people read it. It just seemed so trendy. And I was like, how good can it really be? And I read it for the first time last January. I was like, fine, my goal is to read all of the boring self-help business books that everyone recommends. And I finally read it and I was like, oh, okay, I get this. This needs to be a yearly read for me to come back to, because as soon as he mentioned shifting from outcome goals and reaching this outcome to like making it a part of my identity, not I'm trying to quit smoking, I am not a smoker, changing that, I started to try and apply that to my own life. And it was a big sort of switch for me personally, but also clinically, where people are trying to function in a certain way. I'm trying to make my knee pain better, or no, I am a person who puts in the work to make my knee pain better, or whatever it is. So I rebelled against that book, regrettably, for a long time. And it really did help to shift that mindset when it came to goal setting and actually realizing why is it harder for us to stick to some goals compared to others. So you also mentioned environment too. And I think me personally, one of my goals for the new year is to be more purposeful daily with my prayer time and my spiritual time. And I realized that in the beginning of the year was super consistent about creating that environment around me that allowed me to be successful in that goal. And now it's sort of fallen off a little bit where I'm not going to bed as early to be able to set that environment. I forget oftentimes. So I also feel like what goes into environment is the accountability and the people that you have around you that either foster, and I love the way that you said activate, that environment activates you to form that routine or that habit versus maybe pulls you away from that. So speak a little bit more on that environment component, and also how the people you have around you influence your ability to make that habit part of your routine.
Yeah. So our environment is always activating us to do certain things. So if we can become aware of what is in our environment, we can then either harness the productive activators, or we can figure out how to get rid of kind of negative activators that are either like distracting us or pulling us away from what we want to do. Or we can set up intentional activators, which you said you were forgetting. So we might need to set up intentional activators to do the thing we want to do. So perhaps like I like to meal prep every weekend. And so I've already gone grocery shopping usually earlier in the weekend, and that stuff is just sitting out ready for me to prep. So it's kind of calling my name when I open the fridge. Okay, the stuff's sitting around raw. you need to prep me now so you can actually eat it. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here all week unedible, right? But perhaps if I had a bunch of desserts or something sitting around, that could be calling my name too and pulling me away from that healthy meal prep and eating things that aren't good. On the contrary, if I didn't have any of those in there, I need to set up activators to get me to do that healthy meal prep. If you want to work on your spiritual practice and prayer every morning and you said you're forgetting, I'm curious, like, what were you doing to get you to remind you to do that in the first place? Were you just like literally like willing yourself to remember? Because perhaps we could set up things like alarms or little sticky notes wherever you do your prayer thing, or if you have things that you utilize in prayer. I don't know what kind of religion you are, but like my grandma used to always use a rosary. Perhaps if that's the thing, you put rosary beads down somewhere in your visual field so that you can have that as a reminder. Or you did mention social environment. If your partner is spiritual as well, perhaps, either they join you or you have a conversation with them to encourage you that during this time, this is what I want to be doing. But yes, anything in our environment can be a trigger. So it's really important for us to bring awareness to those triggers that are present, that are both productive and negative, and ones that we might need to intentionally bring in to encourage us and nudge us to do those things we want to do.
How do you help people and coach people to start reflecting on those things? Because some of the time it's like you probably walk around in your environment every day, not even realizing what's an activator pulling you towards something or pulling you towards another option. So how do you recommend people start to like reflect or even journal? Is it a journaling exercise? Is it something like that where people can start to think, okay, if this is something I want to make as part of my routine or something that I want to break as part of my routine, how do you recommend people going about their environment and analyzing it almost from this like outsider's perspective on what's drawing me towards this routine that I want to build and what's drawing me away from that?
Mm-hmm. I think there's two ways you can go about it. One is to intentionally audit, particularly your home space, but potentially workspace or third space as well. And just noticing, what you have set up and how your space is set up. But I think probably the easiest way is to try to be aware of, especially if it's a bad habit, when you're doing the thing. Like try to catch yourself in the act. And obviously, for those that are listening to this, they might be more cognizant now. And then I'm a coach, so I literally have these conversations with my clients. But trying to catch yourself in the act. So if I'm suddenly scrolling social media and doing work, see if you can catch yourself doing that. And then notice, especially for bad habits, there's often a lot of internal triggers. So like if we're scrolling social media, what's going on? Am I bored? Am I stressed? Am I tired? Do I feel like I'm doing meaningless, menial work? What is causing me to stray from, what I should be doing, productive work? And instead I'm scrolling social media. And then why was it so easy to default to that? That I literally, I've got my phone right here. So did I have my phone in the pocket? Am I logged into those apps? Is it really easy to mindlessly get lost in them? This is something that I've personally done. Like I don't have any social media on my phone, and I mostly only use it for work related purposes most of the time. And so if I need to go on it, I literally have to download the app because I won't use it on my computer because their interfaces on the computer are so annoying. So I have to download the app. I have to re-log into the app. So I have to make two conscious choices that this is what I want to do. And I try to limit my time. So I also time block. Like I'm going to spend 30 minutes to do a social media post on X today. And sometimes I'll intentionally go on for fun as well. But same thing, like I have to download and log in the app. So I have to choose like, this is how I want to be entertained right now. I'm not just mindlessly getting lost in hours of scrolling, or I'm sure, many ladies are familiar with this where you like, go pee on the toilet and then all of a sudden 15 minutes have gone by because Instagram or whatever is right there and you're like, what the hell just happened? Like I just totally got hijacked. So catching yourself in the moment, and it's hard to do at first, like it's easier said than done. There's a strategy called urge surfing, which is like, okay, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I want to scroll social media, I want to go mindlessly eat because it's enjoyable and rewarding, triggers that dopamine cascade. And so, maybe the first time you notice this, you just notice it and you're like, screw it, I'm just going to do it. And then hopefully the next time you do it, you notice it and you're like, oh, I'm just going to sit here and like think a little bit more about like, what am I feeling? Why am I doing this? Do I want to do this? If I want to do it, that's fine. Like if I intentionally want to give in, cool, there's nothing wrong with that. It's more about like the unintentional, mindless that's distracting us from what we really want to do, that we're trying to kind of get a hold of and bring our conscious self to. And then over time, hopefully just become more and more aware of, okay, this is why I'm doing this. And this is the problem that, the unproductive behavior is solving, whether that's scrolling social media or mindless eating or whatever it might be. With a bad habit, there's always like 2 extra steps that come into play compared to a good habit. And that's that, like, if we need to remove a bad habit, and I really don't like to call them bad habits because they're solving a problem, but I need to understand what problem it's solving first. And I can't just take it away because then there's a void. And, we don't like voids by nature. Physics doesn't like voids. So we have to fill that void with a more productive habit. Oftentimes those productive habits aren't as enjoyable, as easy, as obvious to do. So we need to use strategies to try to fill that with a productive habit and make it just as easy, just as obvious, just as enjoyable to do it.
I like that you said creating 2 barriers for social media. Like you said, like you have to think about it. Okay, this is what I want to do. Download the app. And that, I guess, double step automatically requires reflection a little bit, where if we struggle with understanding what our activators are in our environment for this habit, or intrinsically, I like that you mentioned that too, because doom scrolling on social media, I feel like, is more intrinsic. And like you said, there's easy access to your phone. You might not even think about it, but I was thinking more reflecting and journaling. But I like how you said, like, catch yourself in the act, or have someone else around you, I guess, possibly like your partner or roommate that sees you doing something, like, hey, remember you said. I don't know if that's even an effective way to do that too, but I didn't even think about trying to like catch myself in the act.
And like, even when you are catching yourself in the act, it is helpful to take notes. So especially when I'm helping someone, build a habit, whether that's breaking one or actually putting a new one in, like as they do the behavior, disengage from the behavior, I do have them often jot down just some simple notes in like their phone notes or whatever it might be. Might not use the phone notes if we're trying to get off the phone, but an actual journal or whatnot. But yeah, it's very helpful so that you can look back and actually look at hard data, both like objective data, whether that's, I found myself doom scrolling for 5 minutes before I caught myself, or subjective data, like I realized that it was like very engaging and pleasurable, but now I realize I'm behind on my project, and so I'm feeling XYZ now. So both that subjective and objective data is super helpful for making decisions of how you like move forward with, I like to call it your experiment towards behavior change. It's not just a linear thing. And the more data you have, the more efficient you'll be in making those changes, rather than kind of like spiraling around and chasing one shiny object after another.
I like the language you use with it, saying, like you said earlier, bad habit. I meant to mention this, but not a bad habit, but like you said, realizing it's maybe not the habit that I want to be formed and filling it with something else. Because I think a lot of the times with habit formation, with New Year's goals, we can get so down on ourselves for not successfully accomplishing them, or, oh, I reverted to this bad habit that I want to break, and I didn't successfully accomplish this goal that I wanted to make. And you were saying the process of experimentation, like using words that I guess foster this sense of effort and maybe more journey-based language to reaching certain habits or goals that we have, or creating those as part of our routines and not thinking of them as bad or negative in some way, but taking a step back and realizing what problem they're solving and not being so hard on yourself for maybe reverting back to that. But I just like the language that you use for some of this kind of stuff.
One of the things, and this was really game changing when I was first learning about kind of behavior change and behavioral science, and that we really talk about in our course and the book that I have coming out, is that every behavior is a good behavior, because every behavior is there to solve a problem. And thank God, like we'd be falling over ourselves if we weren't solving these problems immediately. Where they become a quote unquote problem for us, or maybe a bad behavior or a bad habit, is when they come in contrast with our long-term goals. So in being able to have long-term goals is actually rather new and a privilege to be able to think about, because for millennia, we had to solve for right now. We had to survive. And some people even today are still in survival mode, and they don't have the privilege of thinking long-term. So they need to do whatever they need to do to survive right now. So thank goodness we have that, and you should have lots of empathy for yourself. What I prefer to refer to them as is productive and unproductive habits, because it's only when they come in contrast to our long-term goals that they potentially are a problem. But in the moment, they're very helpful.
And you not reaching a certain thing or falling short of what you think is experimentation. It's you're experimenting with creating this habit or goal or behavior change that you want.
Yep.
You also mentioned the need for reward, and you said a lot of people forget that.
Yeah.
I know for me, sometimes I forget the phrase, but dangle a carrot in front of your face or dangle a cookie in front of your face, like some sort of external rewarding stimuli for my effort towards a certain goal. Explain the different types of rewards for us and what roles they play when it comes to either goals, habits, or both.
Yeah. So one thing we want to make sure to steer away from is what's called like the carrots and sticks method. That's been around for ages. And that's where you dangle the carrot. You're like, oh, if I, lose 5 pounds, or if I, exercise every day for the next week, I get to indulge in a delicious meal, or I get to go gamble or party or whatever. And on the other side, the stick side, you get punished in some way for not reaching your goal or doing the behaviors you're supposed to do every day. We don't want to be going after those external rewards. I don't really like to use the term rewards too much. I like to use rewarding experience or enjoyable experience, is that the experience of the behavior needs to be rewarding, but we don't really want to go after a reward. And the difference is that, like, okay, if I am, I want to run a mile every day. If I am just like loathing that entire 10-minute mile or whatever it takes me to do it, then I'm likely not going to keep doing that for very long. Like, I'm not going to keep doing something that is unenjoyable. And oftentimes what we consider valuable and worth going after to achieve our goals, not only are they maybe like just meh toward them and they're unenjoyable, like they might actually be like painful in some way, physically or emotionally or whatnot. So we need to make the experience of doing it rewarding rather than doing it to get a reward. And so if I keep using the running example, can I like put on, if it takes 10 minutes to run a mile, can I put on my 4 like all-time favorite pump up songs to make that experience enjoyable? Or my favorite comedy podcast? Or can I go do that run in my favorite place in the city that I live in? So how do I make the experience more rewarding rather than going after a reward? Because the problem with going after a reward or potentially getting punished for not achieving the reward is that at best we stick to it for that amount of time, until the reward comes or until we potentially get punished. At worst, we end up undergoing reactance. This is where we basically do the exact opposite of what we want to do. We end up sitting on the couch and we ended up, going out and binge eating at a burger joint instead of eating the healthy food we cooked. We end up sitting and watching TV instead of having our spiritual or prayer time. So it's more about making the experience of the behavior we're doing rewarding. And there are a few strategies we can do. Temptation bundling is one of them, which is where we make a pact with ourselves that we're only going to do a rewarding behavior with the desired behavior. So like I said, maybe we're only get to listen to our 4 favorite songs or that comedy podcast when we're doing our 10-minute run. At no other time can we listen to those songs. At no other time can we listen to that podcast. And that's one strategy of many that can be helpful. But we want to try to refrain from, if I do X behavior or if I achieve X goal, then I'm going to get X, Y reward.
Are you always going to have to rely on making that journey or that experience rewarding? Or is there a shift that can happen to be like, oh, I am playing my favorite music on this run. I think I'm actually enjoying running. I'm a runner. Shifting from that rewarding experience and journey to now this is a part of my identity. This is who I am as a runner. Is there any overlap there?
So for most people, that does happen. And that's the whole point, is we need to make it rewarding early on, when it's not fun, when it's not enjoyable, when it's hard, to get us to consistently do the reps so that it becomes a repeated behavior or a habit, so that it eventually becomes a part of our identity. So no longer am I someone who's trying to build a running habit. I am a runner. And that is an important part of who I am. So now I go run because running is who I am. And yeah, I might still want to listen to some music, or I might be to a point where I can just go for a run wherever, whenever, because it feels good to reinforce who I am and to live the person I want to be. Now, I mean, I don't know about you. We both started out in fitness. Bulgarian split squats are never going to be fun. They always suck. But like, I still do them because they're great for you, and I'm an exerciser and I'm a fitness person, and it's a very important part of my identity. I want to be healthy and move until I'm 100 years old. You know, eventually the hope is that it does become a part of your identity and one of your values. And so that is what kind of motivates you to keep doing it. But it's super important initially to create those rewarding experiences around those desired behaviors.
Yeah, Bulgarian split squats, man. That's that example doesn't resonate with me. I don't know what will, because that is one. But I agree. It's like I do them because I want good bone mineral density, good muscle mass. Like I have all of these longer term goals. I am someone who cares about my health, and therefore I do that. So I guess when it comes to rewards, I was always taught early on extrinsic rewards are good, but you're sort of flipping that script and saying it's the rewarding journey early on, and maybe it turns more of an intrinsic reward in who I am as a person as we sort of progress through.
Yeah. I will say there's maybe one caveat to that is if you have an extrinsic reward that reinforces the habit. So the easiest example I can give is especially when I've worked with like weight loss clients in the past. If we had the goal of like, we're going to do some sort of exercise for 20 minutes, at least 5 days a week. And we set the goal that if we hit at least 80% of that in a month, then I'm going to buy a new pair of workout clothes. So that workout clothes is exciting because it makes you look good and it makes you want to go reinforce the habit. If you're working on a writing habit and you hit, 20 minutes, 5 days a week, 80% of the time for a month, maybe you go buy like a really cool new pen or a really cool new journal, or finally you get your new laptop that you've always been wanted if you hit it for a certain amount of time. So that's the one place where I would say it's sort of okay to have an external reward if the external reward kind of reinforces the behavior we're trying to build.
Or the journey too, makes the journey that much more rewarding because you're seeing yourself work out in a cute new activewear set and you're like, wow, this is making that journey, that experience more rewarding. So when it comes to motivation and discipline with forming habits, what role do those guys play for habit formation and behavior change specifically?
Yeah, so motivation is going to ebb and flow. It's kind of like emotions or the wave on the ocean. It's going to come and go for a variety of reasons. So you don't want to count on it, because if you count on it, you're not going to be consistent. Discipline or willpower, same thing. It's going to ebb and flow. What research actually shows, especially with discipline and willpower, is that those who quote unquote have the most use it the least. And the reason they use it the least is because they're actually setting up their environments, like we talked about earlier, so that they don't have to use discipline. So their home environment, their work environment, where they spend 80+% of their time, it's set up so that the desired choice, the desired behavior is the easy, obvious, default, enjoyable behavior to do. And then they only have to reserve using discipline or willpower or, that boost of motivation when they're kind of out in the wild. Maybe they're traveling, maybe they're at a work conference or something where they don't have hardly any control over the environment. And then they can flex that discipline muscle because, they have this identity and these values that they hold. Or they decide that like, this is a one-off situation and, this is a social gathering or whatever, and I want to enjoy this and I'm just going to enjoy it. And then when I get back to my normal environment, I'm going to get right back to my normal habits and behaviors right away. So it plays a role. I would say the biggest thing, particularly with motivation, is like early on when you're starting your behavior change journey, is really thinking into like, what behavior do I want to do? Why do I want to do it? Why is now a good time to do it? And really digging in and keep asking yourself why. No matter what the behavior is, answer it to yourself, write it out, and then ask why again and get to that really deep why. And then that can serve as the motivator when you're out in the wild and life gets crazy and chaotic, or it's a hell of a day and everything's going wrong. You can really dig into that why as your motivation, as opposed to just some superficial source of motivation.
Switching gears a little bit, I have struggled in the past with goal formation and forming way too many goals in the new year, way too many goals that I want to make as habits as part of my routine in the new year, where it's each facet of my life, like professional, personal, interpersonal, faith, financial, travel, all sorts of goals in all sorts of categories. So that's one of my problems. The second problem I've had in the past is making too broad of goals. So thinking like travel more, where it's hard for me to actually create systems and experiences, I guess, that allow me to be successful in that goal because I don't have an objective way to track. Have I traveled more? So A, I make goals, too many goals, and B, I make goals that are too broad. What would be some of your tips for people who are trying to make goals and build habits off of those goals? How can we form better goals from even a language standpoint that allows us to be better at knowing what those goals are, remembering them, and putting in the systems and environments in place needed to reach those goals?
I'll say one thing that I always think back is that success breeds success. So we want to set ourselves up for success and have success in one area so that we can then fuel success in other areas. And what do I mean by that? Well, you set way too big of goals and too many. So start with just one thing. And, you said travel more. Well, I mean, I guess it's sort of an action, like you're going about traveling, but it's not really. It's like an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But what does travel more mean? Like how much are you traveling now? How are you quantifying that? And how much more? If you're taking 3 trips a year, what does travel more mean? Is that 4 trips a year now? Is that 5? Are we doubling it? Is it 6 trips a year? Are we tripling it? Is it 9 trips? Like, what does travel more mean, actually? And then how are you going to track that so that you can account for, okay, 2025, I took 3 trips, and how am I going to know if I took 6 in 2026? That's what I want. Also, the behaviors to traveling more. What does that mean? It means I have to create a plan. I have to buy tickets. I have to purchase hotel rooms. I have to create an itinerary of what I want to do and where I want to do. So actually blocking time to do those actions that make travel happen. And like starting small. So like I wouldn't go from 3 trips to 9 trips. I would probably say, can I get 4 trips? Like, I don't know how crazy your schedule is, but can I do just one more? Start small so that you see yourself being successful. And then if you achieve that, great, your success, you've built the rep, you've built the identity. If you want to do more, great, but you're already successful. So instead of what we want to try to avoid is like failure states and shame spirals early on. And so we really want to set ourselves up to have early success. And success is motivating too, but that will get us to do hopefully the next rep. So being able to like actually quantify where I am, where I want to go, then what behaviors do I need to do to make that happen? And then actually blocking the time to do those behaviors. You do want to make sure that whatever behaviors you're picking, they're smaller than you think. If you've ever read BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits book, he talks about, it's so absolutely ridiculous, but it's because it makes a point. Like if you want to build a flossing habit, you start flossing the gap between one tooth. You're successful, you've built the rep, you're a flosser if you flush just one gap every night. Now, it feels absolutely ridiculous, and we call this in our program the domino action, because what happens is like, if you complete the domino action, if I floss just one tooth gap, I've done the rep. I've, checked the box if I'm building that identity as a flosser. Good, can call it. Likelihood of me stopping, because it feels so ridiculous of flossing one tooth gap, is very slim. So I'm likely going to knock all the dominoes over and just get them all flossed because it takes like 30 seconds anyways. So you want to start smaller than you think. And the other reason is like, say you just have the worst day ever. I mean, sure, you could miss one day here or there. We say you should be getting the reps in 80% of the time, and you should be able to build a pretty strong habit doing that. You don't have to be perfect by any means. But if you're missing more than that, then you're not really building the habit, building the identity, and it's not going to be easily repeatable. So small, build early success, and then you can incrementally level up from there.
I don't know if you realize that you did this, and maybe I'm applying what you said earlier in the wrong way, but with a goal of travel more, outcome-based, you immediately broke it down into process goals. And then I like how you basically did that for my goal, my outcome goal of travel more, and then you broke it up into process, like what flights do I need to book, all of these sorts of things. Is that how someone who maybe sets broad goals should think about it? Let's take maybe a more popular example of exercise more. Is there a benefit to breaking it down from that outcome goal to more process goals? And then, like you said, reflecting on why is this a goal? Why is this my goal right now at this moment in time? I guess maybe tying that more to identity is how I took that.
Right.
Is that accurate or?
Yeah. So start with, it's important to have that outcome goal, but just think of it like set it and forget it. Like that's the guidepost. Now, what do I need to do to get there? And then why do I want to do that? Because I might think the obvious. If I want to exercise more, if I go all the way down to, okay, exercise more, so strength train 3 times a week, cardio twice a week, and then I get into the why, well, I want to be healthy, I want to play with my grandkids, all this stuff that really is really meaningful. But then I go back to those behaviors, and if like I hate cardio on a treadmill, well, that's not going to work for me. So maybe I decide I'm going to go do a cardio dance class instead. So I do need to get down the process and then identity and figure out what's actually going to work. But I also need to figure out like, what am I going to do long term? How do I balance that need between what I kind of have to do and what I enjoy doing? It's going to depend per person. But yes, outcome, behavior, identity, and then often going back to the behaviors to make sure you have the right person behavior fit, and that, you have the time to do it, you have the resources and skills to do it, so that you're actually successful in doing it.
Is there something where when it comes to behavior change, people can really only remember certain goals, like 3 goals throughout the whole year. Is there something very like objective about how many goals we're actually to keep in mind throughout a whole year to be consistent with or work towards those goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think 3 is generally the number that's thrown out there. I would say it really depends on the person. Some people can compartmentalize, like, okay, I have this goal for work and this goal for personal life and this goal for XYZ. I would say it really depends. I mean, how complex, how big, hairy, audacious is this goal? You know, I don't have a hard and fast answer to that, but I would definitely say most people's lives are crazy. So if you are successful with 1 goal in a year, that's probably more successful than most people are. Most people are just cruising and surviving. And not thriving. So start with 1 and see how that goes. Build from that. Try to actually be successful and achieve what you want to achieve consistently for the long term. And then maybe you don't wait until you fully achieve that. But once you start grooving success with that 1, then maybe you start another. Some people might be able to handle like 2 or 3, like 1 work and 1 personal. But honestly, like if I'm working with them, I'm going to do a whole assessment on them to see kind of what's going on in their life. But I would say less is more when you're starting out. And then as you become more and more competent and you see yourself being successful and you have the time and the resources and the skills to be able to do the things you want to do, sure. Yeah, for sure. Layer on more of them.
Bringing it back to the tiny changes that you said, like floss in between 1 tooth. I mentioned earlier about the daily spiritual practice and my timer that I do have a timer for the environment that I'm trying to create that activates this certain habit formation that I want and behavior change that I want in my life. I'd set it for 6 minutes because I knew 6 minutes is what I can like actually do every day. And I've noticed after I noticed how inconsistent I was with some of the broad and quantity of goals that I used to make, that it really was that floss 1 tooth sort of goal that I'm able to stay more consistent with. And yeah, like you said, flossing 1 tooth, you're not just going to floss 1 tooth. Most of the time, you're going to want to do everything else. So I think I've found success without even knowing it, I guess, with those small, like 6 minutes. I can do 6 minutes. Like, that's okay. Or we even teach it with exercise where it's like, do 1 set of your workout, see how you feel after that. And most of the time, people can get over that hump a little bit too. So yeah, I think that's been one of the keys, I guess, to me consistently improving my habit formation and goal setting abilities.
It's so easy to fall into, trying to go after those big outcome goals or big behavior goals. I mean, even myself, when I started writing the book I'm writing close to a year ago, I was like, Tuesdays and Thursdays are my best days to write. I work from home. I have more kind of free, quote unquote, free time. I don't have to be face to face with clients or in meetings and whatnot. And so I was like, I'm going to write for 3 hours every Tuesday and Thursday. And then, the to-dos of business and work would get in the way. And I just would end up doing nothing over something. And so I was like, I need to actually assess my behavior here. So applied the assessment that we use, for all our coaches and everything, because, I'm a human. We're always a practitioner, never a master. And so I realized that by setting such a big goal, I was doing nothing instead. And so once I actually was like, okay, 20 minutes a day, I can definitely even do 20 minutes on my crazy Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And then I actually found that once I let myself do just 20 minutes a day, I actually ended up averaging 2 hours a day. It's crazy.
That's wild. I was wondering, with your book writing, I was going to ask, what parts of what you coach people on have you had to use? So it's interesting to hear, okay, hang on, I had to actually break it up and set a more achievable goal for myself of 20 minutes rather than the multiple hours a few days a week.
Oh, no, I definitely ended up using it on myself. But it is, like I said, so easy. Have empathy for yourself to fall into I know how to do this. I can just do this, do the thing. But yeah, I mean, actually, if you read the book, do 2 personal examples, I think in chapter 10 or 11 of the book. And one of them is writing the book and how I actually assessed my behavior and tracked it throughout and which strategies I used to get me to stick to it. And then, like I said, I collected hard data and I set the goal for 20 minutes a day once I kind of analyzed my behavior and my environments and whatnot. And I averaged just shy of 2 hours once I actually sat down to assess things and put the right strategies in place to help me take action consistently.
You are also the founder of Habit Coach Professionals, and I'll say as a PT, one of the hardest things to get patients to do is not telling them what to do, but actually getting them to put in the behavior change to do it. Mm-hmm. So if any of you guys resonate with that or in the healthcare field or nutrition or personal training or dietetics coaching, or I feel like every industry has some component of needing to get behavior change in someone else. So I'll leave the link to the Habit Coach Professionals website and Erin below if you guys are interested in that certification and like learning more, because I feel like we are just touching the surface on all that you guys cover in that program. But you also just finished writing a book. Talk a little bit about that too. All that goes into that, why you wanted to write a book and how it dives in a little bit deeper, even for the everyday person like me.
Yeah. So in order to talk about why I wrote the book, I'll kind of talk about why I started Habit Coach Professionals in the first place. So I've been coaching since 2008. And I started out in just fitness, and then it was fitness and nutrition. And then basically those two realized that, okay, like I still can't really help someone live a fully healthy, happy life. Fitness solved one problem, nutrition solved a little bit more of a problem. So then I started sleep and recovery, motivation and mindset, how our workplaces and home spaces are designed. But I kept running into one problem, which is no matter what I teach my clients, whatever knowledge you give them, skills you help them develop, I could never figure out how to get them to do the thing, whatever the thing is, move more, eat better, sleep better, pray more, meditate more, whatever it might be, when I'm not there with them. They're great when we're in session. If you're lucky, that's maybe 3 hours a week with the client. If you're lucky, most people would probably get about an hour or a half hour with their clients a week in person or online. But yeah, they have 160 something hours to do what they want. And that's a lot of time to kind of mess up all the good stuff that we did in our 1, 2, or 3 hours worth of sessions. And so it was really frustrating because I really did want to help people change. And so once I finished graduate school, I was still kind of hungry for more to try to figure out this problem. And so I would say actually in graduate school, I started to discover behavioral science. It's not my formal background. I studied exercise physiology, but realized that it doesn't matter how much you know about the body if you can't get people to behave in a way that's productive for them. So I started to come across behavioral science and studying it just on my own, not in graduate school. And eventually connected with my business partner who does have a behavioral science background. But the reason I connected with him is I realized that behavioral science actually solves this problem. It teaches us how we make decisions, what makes behaviors happen, how behaviors turn into habits, and how our various environments, whether that's built, home, workspace, third space, social, friends, family, coworkers, mental, what's going on in our head, digital, all of our devices, how those impact the behaviors or the choices we make, behaviors we do, and habits we form. And that was not being taught to coaches, at least directly in our continuing education opportunities, other than maybe like trans theoretical model of change or motivational interviewing, all of which are great, all of which we need to know, but they don't teach us how to actually get our clients to do the dang thing when we aren't with them. And behavioral science does once you understand it and know how to assess behavior in people's environments. So that wasn't in kind of the coaching space. And I thought, well, I can teach my clients this directly, but if I teach my clients, I help one client at a time, which is great. But if I teach a coach who has 20 clients, then I'm helping 21 people at a time, the coach and their 20 clients. And so I kind of wanted to scale what I'd been learning, but I also needed a more kind of like formal background in the network of behavioral science. And so that's why I ended up partnering with my business partner, Samuel Salzer. And so he's, has behavioral science training. And together we built a 10-week cohort-based mentorship and certification for coaches, teaching them behavioral science and how to actually assess behavior and help people form habits and do the thing, whatever the thing is when, the coach isn't by their side. So I've done that for almost 7 years. We've served coaches in, I think, 25 countries now in 25 states, which is mind-blowing to me, without any paid marketing somehow. The world is crazy. And so having done that, we've really refined our process and our program, and it's done really well. But then I've come kind of full circle back in that, okay, one, not everybody is a coach. Not everybody can hire a coach. It's a privilege to hire a coach. It's a privilege to enroll in a 1,000+ certification program. And so I hate that we're not intentionally, but, what we're teaching is hidden behind a $1,000+ paywall. And it's a great program. It should probably cost more than that from what I'm told. But still, that's a high investment for a lot of people. And also a lot of people can't hire coaches. So I wanted to make what we teach available to the lay population, to everybody, so that anybody, if they want to, can start to coach themselves towards better habits. And so that's where the book comes in. The book is called Do the Thing. It came from what I told you at the beginning. It's like, how do I get my clients to do the thing? Or myself at times to do the thing, like the writing habit I was trying to work at. So that'll be out hopefully in March. I'll say that on the air. Hopefully late March, but definitely in 2026 here, so that anybody can use behavioral science to coach themselves towards better habits, even when, life is messy and chaotic and maybe you don't have the motivation to do what you want to do.
That's wonderful. I love it. You also mentioned a launch program or an ambassador program of some sort.
Yeah. So being that the book is coming out pretty soon, we're building a launch team for it. The goal is to get to 500. I'm at just I have 200 right now. So over this next month or so, really going to have to build that up. And so if you join the launch team, it's free to join. It takes 1 minute to join. You just have to put your name, email, and what tier you'd like to enroll at. But if you join, you'll get first access to the book and a free digital copy of the book. In exchange for a small commitment, there are 3 tiers of commitment. So tier 1, you agree to buy some form of the book. Obviously, the ebook will be the cheapest version. You agree to leave a review, and you agree to share about it with your friends, family, coworkers, whether that be online or in person. Tier 2, you're pre-committing to buying the book and leaving a review. And tier 3, you're pre-committing to buying a book.
I love it. I will leave that link below if you guys are interested. I will definitely be signing up. Like I said, with the Atomic Habits, I think that book I need to read year after year. And I have a feeling your book, I will have to be reading year after year and even listening to this episode year after year. And maybe even, every half year be like, okay, let me regroup and understand. Because for me, it helps me to understand the science behind these sorts of things to actually make it stick in my brain a little bit and help motivate me towards certain things that I'm trying to do. So I think when it comes to different resources that you have out there, you have tons on the website too. So I'll leave the link to the Habit Coach Professionals website below too. But I think anytime I can remind myself the importance of taking a step back and analyzing certain situations in my environment and certain activators and just my routines as a whole to see what is actually pushing me towards certain goals that I want and what is retracting me from certain goals that I want. I think any time I can do that is super helpful.
Yeah. And I'll say Atomic Habits is a really great book. It's the top one I recommend. The second other one I probably recommend is Good Habits, Bad Habits by Wendy Wood. She's a researcher in California. The reason I also wrote this book, other than having done the certification and wanting to make that available to the population at large, is that I felt like whenever I gifted Atomic Habits to a variety of friends and family members, coworkers, when they'd read the book, they're great books. You should read them. But you'd get this grab bag of strategies that you're kind of left with okay, let me grab some spaghetti, throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. But you never really know if what you grabbed was the right strategy in the first place. You're just crossing your fingers that this works. And so one of the reasons I wrote Do the Thing is so that you actually have an assessment process to figure out why is what I want to do not happening or what I don't want to do still happening, so that I can then use whatever I learned from Atomic Habits or Good Habits, Bad Habits or Tiny Habits to pick the right strategy based on how I've assessed where things fall through in the habit loop, so that I'm actually efficient and effective in creating behavior change and achieving my goals, rather than just trying for 2 or 3 weeks or 6 weeks and failing and giving up or going after the next shiny object instead of actually sticking to it and find something that works for the long haul.
So it's the information, the education part, and then yours comes in with the application and how to actually apply some of the behavior change science to your own life too. I love that. There's a trend right now on TikTok called the learning curriculum and building out your own learning curriculum. So I'm picturing if people have this desire to learn more about behavior change, they can combine all of these things and be okay, I'm going to do Atomic Habits and then Wendy Wood's book and then be okay, how can I apply all of that to my life? A nice little learning curriculum on behavior change.
I wouldn't know. I don't have a TikTok and never will get one, but I'm glad. Hey, that sounds productive.
It's awesome. It's fun to learn new things outside of the classroom when you're an adult. So that's what it is. It's building your own curriculum outside to continue that growth mindset and that learning throughout life, which is super fun. So thank you so much for coming on. I know I learned a lot. Again, I'm going to have to come back and listen to this episode. I'll leave all of the links below that we mentioned during the episode, but I hope you guys learned a lot from Erin. I'm very grateful for her for coming on and sharing all of this because it is just so much deeper than what we think when it comes to habit formation and goal setting in general, and especially with the new year. So I'm very, very grateful.
Well, I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Of course. I hope you guys learned a lot and enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys again on the next episode of Wellness Big Sis, the pod.